What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Training Simplified podcast. My name is Matt with Training Simplified, and today I am stoked to be joined by Ashley Erickson. Ashley and I go way back. We used to work together at the big burrito company, Chipotle, and now Ashley is running her own consulting company, her own business called AC Experiential. She's an executive experiential strategist. I'm going to let her explain what that means here in a minute, but she led all things global events at Chipotle. And now in her consulting business, she is working with a variety of companies, least of not which is Starbucks, and leading their giant employee conference that is coming up in June this year. And I'm stoked to hear a little bit more about that. Ashley, how's it going?
Hi, good. It's great to see you, Matt. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. Yeah, I'm
Good.
super. I'm super stoked to talk to you because we work with a lot of clients that do events, that do employee conferences, and they put them on for their employees. They put them on for managers. But you at Chipotle, like you just did it at like another level. It was just
That's
insane.
flattering.
It was insane to see it over the years. Like I watched it grow. As someone
Yeah.
like I went to the conferences, helped out, supported a lot of the conferences. But we watched it go from large scale and big and like really, really great to like by the end it was like Imagine Dragons were there. Derek Jeter was on stage talking to our COO, and it was just like next level as far as like execution, as far as the feeling of the event and like making it special for our managers. So yeah, if you guys don't know, Ashley is the best around, the best in the biz, and putting on these employee conferences. Um, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now with your business and with this big client that you're working with?
Sure. As you said, I was head of global events at Chipotle for 12 years. I started in the marketing department, so really was leading quite a lot of marketing initiatives, and one of those was the event space. In 2022, we had augmented that events portfolio to a place where it needed more attention. And so that's when I moved specifically into an events only role, and oversaw conferences. At Chipotle, we called it AMC, which was our sort of all company meeting, FLC, our leadership meeting, an incentive program, partnership summit, a number of large scale programs, as well as sort of some of those smaller venues. And I really saw an opportunity in the market for a lot of these organizations that maybe aren't able to invest in a full-time event professional. It's a large spend, and they feel like the spend of the program is all they're willing to put out for it, right? As opposed to additionally a salary for someone in a role like that. And so I decided to start AC Experiential to give an opportunity to those companies that have a significant employee base, have an interesting story, and just need some help telling it. And so I've, in my role at Chipotle and now in my role at AC, I really consider event planning. To oversimplify it, there's two buckets: logistics and experience.
Okay.
Marrying those two things together in a really cohesive way, to me, I say you're almost like a feelings dealer. If you're too focused on the content or too focused on the logistics, it all gets muddied, or the attendees can just tell. It's not, there isn't a red thread, there isn't a strategy, and it just feels like a bit of a hodgepodge. So with AC Experiential, I started working with a few clients, and in January, Brian Nickel called and asked me to come to Starbucks for a limited contract. Starbucks hasn't really done large scale meetings since pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And so they've had a ton of leadership change. The one we know well is Brian leaving Chipotle and going to Starbucks. And so, he really wanted me to be able to come in and sort of bridge that narrative and bridge what his expectations were and what he was used to seeing with that new internal team. So really guiding them into, what would make Brian happy for his operators at Starbucks. to give them the best experience that they can.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I do feel like there is something to be said that these conferences become like a kind of a defining moment for like new executives. I mean, I feel like I saw that at Chipotle multiple times. You know what I mean? Like, because there were
Yeah.
multiple CEOs, multiple new leaders, new executives that would come in, kind of, and the conference is sort of the first chance for them to be really introduced to the operators, um,
Yeah,
and like
for
in a
sure.
powerful way.
The sentiment is so important, right? And creating an environment where the attendees feel like they walk away with a real uh, instinct about who that executive is, what
Right.
their intentions are, and like buying in effectively into what that new executive is going to come into the organization and do. There can be a lot of concern and lack of clarity within those leadership changeovers, and so getting everyone together in a space and introducing yourself as a human being and as a leader of the organization, I think is so impactful. And that's why I'm so excited that Starbucks decided to do this. And so, in addition to helping the internal team plan leadership experience, which is the name of the Starbucks meeting, um, they Starbucks has always really executed events as needed. They didn't have a proactive event strategy and schedule like the rhythm that we saw at Chipotle. And
Got it.
so, another component of my work for Brian in the coming months will be to put together a recommendation based on what we're seeing at Starbucks and the cadence that worked really beautifully at Chipotle, and hopefully institute that for that internal team at Starbucks to give them more runway to execute these programs, more cost efficiency as a result of being able to plan ahead, things like that.
Yeah, and maybe for people who don't know, like the cadence at Chipotle was every other year there was like a large scale manager conference, and then
Yep.
the off year there was
Yeah.
one like a smaller one that was more focused on like multi-unit managers and corporate leaders. Is that about how you would
Yep.
break it down?
Yep. Exactly. So we were in a position at Chipotle to do an every other. So to your point, even years were all managers, and odd years were field leadership conference. And then we of course peppered in some other things along the way, both annual and biannual.
Yeah. What if you just had to like I guess sell an executive on just the idea of doing an employee conference and like really investing in it. I mean, first of all, I hear you saying that it's a tool in an executive's tool belt,
Yep.
right? And I mean, I'm thinking maybe like a smaller company. I mean, Chipotle and Starbucks are outliers, right? Um,
Sure.
but like for maybe a place that's a little bit smaller that is questioning if they can invest in this and not even invest. I'm not talking about hiring you or whatever. Just the idea of having an
Yeah,
employee
sure.
conference, like
Yeah.
what would you say to them if they're kind of like on the fence of like, oh, this is a big expense. Like, why would we bring everyone together like this? Like, what is the value of that?
It is certainly an investment. I will not say that it is not a decent amount of money to spend on your organization. That said, there are budgets that can fit everybody. So you don't have to start at the top. And frankly, that's not never my recommendation, because if you
Right.
start there and then you can't execute future state, what have you done? You've set an expectation that you can't meet. So, you know, getting maybe start with leaders. We didn't invite every single human being that worked at Chipotle, sadly. It much people's chagrin,
Right.
right? That everybody wanted to be included. At some point, you have to understand where those layers are, and everywhere doesn't have to be a Four Seasons. You can execute a meaningful event in a reasonable city that's maybe close to your corporate office, so those local people can just drive. They don't have to fly in. You can remove some of that cost. But I will tell you, if you do invest, the energy within your organization shifts
Hmm.
after a well executed conference. If you put things together well, in my experience, the ROI of in person meetings is largely squared in employee sentiment. So, we see employee satisfaction scores increasing, employee retention increasing, especially when you have a cadence of meetings that you can plan out well, for the way your business is structured around, let's say you bonus in March, and then you plan an event so you're flying high, right? You've gotten your bonus, you're happy to be there, you're working through, over about 3 to 4 months, you start to forget about how great that bonus was. And all of a sudden you get a save the date for something that's coming in 3 months that you're excited about. It's in a city you've never been. It's going to have cool entertainment. You're excited to go. All of a sudden, you may have extended that employee's runway. Then you execute the event. They have an exceptional time. They reconnect with their employees. They reconnect with their peers. They get to meet the CEO and shake his hand, and that creates another layer of sentiment. And then they leave that conference excited to tell their employees about it. And here we have now brand evangelists that you've created through this cadence, right? So maybe they're going to work harder to be able to go to the next field leadership conference, because then they get to go to one every year instead of only once a year. Or once every other year. So, I think that the opportunities with employee sentiment, then you talk about if it's well executed and the strategy is well thought out, where those opportunities are in the company, how you can move the needle. We see, let's say you're having a throughput issue and you need to really focus on throughput, getting people through the lines faster, helping educate why that's so important, both to your employees and to the customers. If they leave there having absorbed that information, which is, you build the conference so that happens.
Right.
Then you're seeing increased throughput, increased employee satisfaction, increased customer satisfaction, increased sales, and the snowball happens, right? It's hard to always pinpoint exactly to the event. Like this did something, but I'll tell you, I've had many, many executives come to me and say, you move the needle in the way people feel about working here, and that made this invaluable.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I witnessed it too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to come back to something that you said earlier that I think I know what you meant, but I want to hear from you. You called it the red thread. What is? Tell me what you meant by that. And
yeah, I think of the red thread as what you're overall trying to do at a program. I like to, in some places you call that a story arc. A story arc can help you tell that red thread and ensure that it happens. So it's consistency in the messaging, in the sentiment, in the planning of how that primary objective is articulated across a number of days. It's imperative, in my opinion, to the success of a program and to it feeling like a cohesive, well-structured, well thought out event, to have someone, and I do say someone, I think it's important to have accountability to a singular person of, this is my intention as the CEO of a company or the COO of a company. My intention is that every person leaves here with X. And then you build that entire story arc to articulate that. A good example is at one of the programs that I did for Chipotle, we really wanted people to focus on remembering how proud you should feel to serve the kind of food you serve, and really helping that message get into their bones, right? You should feel proud and you should respect the food that's coming into your restaurant. So we built the story arc to, the COO gets up there and says, you can change the world with Chipotle can change the world, right? Then you have the CFO get up there and say, wow, if you guys really respected the ingredients, here's what that looks like to the bottom line. Then the marketing team gets up there and they say, look at these customer satisfaction ratings and the sentiment on social when everything is done the way that it's supposed to be done through our training materials and the way that it's intended to be cooked. And you thread that throughout. So there's no way that no matter what your learning style is or what you pick up, which we know is like 30% of what they hear at a
Right.
conference like that, if we're lucky,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If they only take away 30%, every single message all tied back to the idea that you should feel proud of and respect the food coming into your restaurant. We even, on a story arc, which I always encourage people to do, it essentially lays out the conference over the course of the days.
Yeah.
So you know who's on stage, key takeaways that they're going to have, and then sort of a summary of what they're going to talk about. You can also layer in their evening events, any specific acknowledgments that happen, all those things that add to the feeling of the event.
Yeah.
Again, going back to being a feelings dealer, right? And then you also can put things in there like something as simple as a transition can really tell a story. That's what you and I worked on a lot, Matt, when you were at Chipotle, is creating some of these videos that we could utilize as vignettes in between speakers to really help drive home the underlying message. They didn't even necessarily need to tie exactly into what you just heard. But at the conference where we were very focused on the food, we showed farmer stories, because then you could identify the lettuce that was coming into your restaurant to that man you saw speaking with such love and care about it. And there's no way that doesn't do something to you, even subconsciously, as an attendee in the audience.
Yeah. Would you approach, like, I guess, choosing what that red thread is or that story arc? Is that something that comes from like just like conversations throughout the year? Does it come by like interviewing the executive team, or just like knowing what where does that come from?
I think that it is a mixture of those things. It depends on the organization, right? Sadly, a lot of event professionals don't have access to the executive team, which is a massive miss. In my estimation, I had a lot of access, and that only increased the quality of the events that I was doing. I was in a lot of, granted, I think too, it had a lot to do with being on the brand side for so long. And so I was a part of a lot of conversations that likely if I had only been owning events, I wouldn't have been a part of. In my tenure, I also owned things like gift cards and uniforms and merchandise and gifting and things like that. And so a great example is at a program I overheard in a meeting rather, that we were having an issue with slips and falls in the restaurants because people were not adhering to the uniform policy. I was in that meeting because I own the uniform. And it dawned on me, we were able to do it then 18 months later. So it's not always quick turn, right? But we were able to give in the swag bag at the conference a pair of non-slip shoes that were designed specifically for that program to every attendee, to then justify, again, back to your point about spend and really, how do we justify this cost? We could say, look, we gave every person in the organization at the GM level and above a pair of these non-slip shoes to drive purchase of the non-slip shoes to crew members, and hopefully drive that the opportunity that the company had with some of the legalities of that, slips and falls in the restaurants. We could really move the needle at an event level. Those are kind of interesting things that you don't think about, but I would say keeping your ear to the ground in every meeting. You never know where inspiration will come from. The way that I always sort of operated was to have a sit down with my key stakeholders initially. So whether, and that's always shifting per event, per leadership team. Some people care more than others. But you want to identify really your 2 or 3 primary stakeholders. And I will also say you have some challenges with a lot of people believing they're a stakeholder, and they may be a secondary stakeholder, but really identifying, let's say it's CEO and COO. So having a sit down with them both together and separate, because some things may come up for one or the other that isn't going to come up if you have them both together at the same time. So I would start with singular and then do maybe 2 weeks or a month later, see if anything shifted, bring them in together and talk through the key priorities you had totally match up with the key priorities that she had, map those out, and then in a room together, really streamline what that looks like, and then start building your story arc from there.
That's great. I'm curious. There's one other thing that's just kind of a key component, I feel like, of any of these conferences, and something that was sort of like the main event at the Chipotle conferences are like the recognition piece, like the awards dinner at Chipotle. It
Huge.
was called the Adobo Awards. And it just got like bigger and better every year. And it was like, I don't know, the crown jewel of the conference, right? To a certain
Yeah.
extent. I don't know how else to describe it, but
Yeah.
like what role does that play in a conference? I'm not even sure what my question is, except for just the fact that like those are so key. And
Major.
I've done a few conferences since, and like worked with different brands, and they all do some version of this. But the ones that like really do it up, I feel like there's a better feeling at the conference. The ones that like really take the award ceremony seriously versus the ones that just hand out some awards, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Like ones that like kind of take it to the next level.
for
Um,
sure.
there's a difference.
I mean, I think there are a couple things here. Invest in people you want to invest in you. The absolute number one thing that you can do, especially in an ops services industry,
Yeah.
these are your top performers. Your absolute tip top in your company that are nominated and that are going to win. So what better people to spend time, money, and energy making feel amazing and the way they should feel, because then they don't have an inclination to leave your business for someone else. So we were always very mindful, and to your point, yes, it grew. It's probably my proudest thing ever that my invention of the Adobo Awards. When I joined the company in 2014, we were trying to figure out what to do with the second night of the program, and talked about group dinners and yada yada yada. And I was like, let's do a Golden Globes. And so it grew from there. You know, we knew we had to feed people, so that was a logistical challenge. And then how do we have an award ceremony that keeps the people that aren't winning or aren't nominated engaged? I think the hopeful thing is that your organization is excited for their cohort, excited for their peers, excited for their regions, and so they can sort of get excited even if they aren't necessarily a part of the evening. They're a part of it because they're a part of the org. And I think too, again, it doesn't have to start there. We didn't start in Grand Garden Arena with custom musical performers and custom outfits on showgirls and the whole nine yards, tubas coming out of like bizarre play, all kinds of stuff. We didn't start there. It was at the beginning, it was sort of a wooden award, but we did the best we could to make it feel important and authentic. And I say this also in that it doesn't have to be an award ceremony. I think if you can afford an award ceremony, if you have all of the KPIs that you need and those sorts of things to be able to do that, and you want to invest the energy because it is a massive lift logistically, do it. If you can't, find any way possible to thank your people for being there, and to call out those top performers. So, another great example is something as simple as a lanyard. You're going to buy them anyway. Do multicolored lanyards, signifying this is the top of the top. These guys did the best. These 100 lanyards mean something to this organization, and showcase people in that way. Digital signage is everywhere. From a Ritz-Carlton to a Residence Inn, there's digital signage you can access. Put the names of people who killed it last quarter on there. That's a low to no cost initiative that just makes people feel seen, and creates opportunities for them to take a photo of their own name in front of a screen and send it to their friends and family, and that means something to people. I think it's super important, especially for event professionals and people that maybe travel a lot for work or have had the opportunity to have experiences that maybe a lot of folks haven't, to really put yourself in, strip away all the stuff you've experienced and think about like, if I'd never been on a plane, how would I look at this differently? If
Yeah.
I'd never been to Las Vegas, what is my experience? And really thinking through your attendee journey in that way makes you a better planner, in my opinion.
That's great. There's something you said that it was like, after you said it, it's like so obvious, but I'd never really thought of it this way. It's just that idea of like, you have to also make those award dinners like fun for the people that didn't get nominated.
Right.
Like that's such a like, I'm like, oh yeah, you do, which is what they were at Chipotle. I mean, there was like comedians and entertainment, and it was fun, and people would enjoy it regardless of whether you were nominated or not. And I feel like that feels really important, you know?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, even something as simple as like giving them an easy, not stressful dress code.
yeah,
Like get
yeah,
people talking about what are you going to wear? Like those are the sorts of things that the lead up is almost as big of a bang as the actual program.
yeah.
Not in the Adobe Awards case, of course, uh, but you know, there's opportunities to create attendee excitement long ahead of the program itself.
All right, question for you. What is your biggest conference fail?
Oh my gosh. This is like if they ask you what's your weakness in a job interview and you have to
Right,
turn it
right.
into a strength.
Exactly.
Um,
I don't know. A
well,
horror
that
story.
is
It doesn't have to
that
be a
is
fail.
that is precisely what I'll tell you about. We had, and this is the reason I am a proponent of secrets. I love a surprise and delight, and it is to cover my own hide. Um, we had a performer that was going to come to the closing night after Adobe Awards. We had a closing party.
Hmm.
Um, we were going to announce that performer on stage at the conclusion of the Adobe Awards. Again,
Like a celebrity, like a well-known
stroke of
performer.
genius. Yes, well-known performer. Stroke of genius to go about it that way because this performer 36 hours before had a family emergency and had to cancel.
Ooh,
So, had we announced this is who you'll be seeing, there could have been disappointment, etc. Also, had I not had a talent uh, expert on site during the program, I might not have been able to find someone to fill in afterwards. So, again,
yeah,
you have to utilize experts if you are not one, right? Like tapping and outsourcing where it makes sense. So we had a talent person on site that was meant to manage that artist that could not no longer make it, and she immediately went to work finding someone else. And by 5 o'clock, I found out at 10 a.m. that day, and by 5 o'clock that same day, we had secured a new performer for the following night.
oh wow,
Um, and it was a bang out party. So no harm,
nice.
no foul. But could have been. There were a couple hours there I was a little high strung, a little high stress.
So it turned into a win.
Yeah, turned into a win. See?
Yeah, that's great. It's like I do just love that idea that you have to have, yeah, the fail safes in place, right? And like you said, are like the people to support the systems in order to like, if something goes wrong, we have XYZ in place in order to take care of it. And that's the power of having people who've done it before, and know the logistics.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
Contingencies are everything. Certainly in this industry, because things will go wrong. There will not be a single program that you leave and go, every single thing was perfect.
yeah,
And honestly, that's kind of half the fun of it. I think
yeah,
anyone in an event, professional role, um, has to be a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, to be honest,
yeah,
because you will get an executive coming to you 6 days before you're supposed to be on site asking for something completely different or added that you didn't save budget for. And
right.
um, you'll have an artist have to cancel for a family emergency. And you just have to be willing to roll with the punches just a little bit, which can be hard for us type A folks.
Nice. Well, you might have already answered this, but also, what was kind of like what's been like your most personally gratifying conference moment or experience?
Yeah, I would probably say Adobe Awards.
Yeah,
They were really something special. And the number of people that reach out to me, that still reach out to me, I've been gone over a year now, and still reach out to me, saying what the event meant to them. Um, maybe a less grandiose option for a big win. But I'd say standing at the door of any venue that you've spent a year working on, designing, creating, and hearing people's reaction to it,
Yeah.
the oohs, the ahs, the getting their phones out to record, the FaceTiming their kids to show them the magic tree in the center of a room that you built, like
Yeah.
those are the real moments that make all the hard times worth it.
That's really cool. That
Yeah.
is a gratifying moment to have to birth something like that. And you actually get to be there and like see it and like see people enjoying it. There's not a lot of things where you get that like kind of gratification
Yeah.
of like getting to actually experience, because you create experiences, and like, yeah, getting to actually experience people experience it is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. One thing I will say is we have a tendency in this industry to forget to enjoy what we created ourselves. And so finding, even if it's only 10 minutes of each night to go, I'm going to enjoy this performance for 10 minutes in the front
Yeah.
row. I'm going to, sit and have a cocktail at Adobo Words and like enjoy myself, or just carving out little moments to take it in as an attendee, I think is really important, because also then you understand the sentiment when it comes through and you realize, oh, the music was too loud, or the food wasn't great, or whatever the things are in the employee surveys and things, the attendee surveys that come back. Like, you should experience everything as an attendee as best you can, just so that you can get ahead of some of that, because every event should build and get better.
Nice. Well, Ashley, if someone needs an executive experiential strategist and they want to work with you, what do they do? Do you have a
Yeah,
website, an email? What do you got?
yeah, feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn, and happy to work together. I'd love to provide some guidance. I think there's a lot of people are intimidated, thinking that it's going to be too expensive to work with an agency and things like that. And same as an event program, there are a lot of ways that we can work together, even if it's just contracting of venues and hotels. Like, those sorts of things are generally at no cost to the organization. So utilize people's connections, utilize experts that can help you through that contracting process, and be sure you get the most concessions and things like that. So yeah, I'd be happy to help anybody that needs.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing your
Yeah,
expertise, and thanks for chatting with me.
of course.
Yeah,
Good to talk to you always.
awesome. Thank you, Ashley.
All right. Bye-bye.
I hit stop.